So, folks, The Girl with No Shadow by Joanne Harris. Boop, boop, boop. Anyways, where do I start? I start with Chocolat, which was a movie that inspired me years. I mean, the movie was enough for me to always have in the back of my mind. And when I wrote my book, I took elements of that movie. I loved it. I loved Juliette Binoche as Vian. She's gorgeous. I don't know. It was my first introduction to her, and I was just mesmerized by her beauty. I loved her gypsy ness, I guess. I love the chocolate. I love how I love the magic and how there was healing properties, more or less, of the chocolate, and how the origin of it, how there was this hint of Latin America, as the source of the chocolate. So the story takes place in France, and in my opinion, magical realism doesn't have to, but takes place in Latin America. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I don't think that's so, but that's what I think. So you think of Gabriela Garcia Marquez, or Isabel Allende, or Laura Esquivel, or I forget the name, the author of The Hummingbird's Daughter, Uria. I forgot his first name. That's my favorite book now, though. But anyways, so I had this affinity for Chocolat. I just loved it. I loved it. The movie, I didn't know that it was a book. I didn't know it was a book, and I don't know how I found out. Maybe walking or looking in bookstores or looking it up online. But the movie was a direct inspiration. That and Like Water for Chocolate the movies were direct inspirations for me to write my book. And when I wrote my book, I bought Chocolat, I bought Like Water for Chocolate, and I read them after, and I couldn't believe how much those two books were. It was almost as if I held the book in my hand. I was like, okay, and rewrote some of the things, the style, I think, the ideas. I was influenced by the movies. I had not read either book. So this is what happens. I was making all these videos of books I was reading. At the time, I was reading a lot of books, and I didn't have unlimited internet access on my iPad, so I wasn't watching a lot of Netflix. I was reading a lot. And so I made a review of Chocolat and a little video review of Chocolat, and Joanne Harris watched it. And I think I kind of pissed her off, because later when I watched it again, I was like, all I did, kind of like what I'm doing now, all I did was talk about my book in my review of her book. All I did was talk about my book, and then I critiqued her book for having big, long paragraphs. That's not a bad thing. It's just I have ADD, and those long paragraphs are intimidating, and I turn the page and like, oh my God, this is such a long paragraph. It has nothing to do with Joanne Harris. It has everything to do with me. But, folks, this book has short paragraphs. I can't believe it. She must have listened to me. She must have heard me. It's like, oh, well, because this fool, I'm going to start writing shorter paragraphs. So because she saw my video and she was like, she posted it on Twitter and was kind of angry. I don't know. I'm not sure. It wasn't like, hey, thanks for this great video that you're posting. But I don't think she liked it. And then when I watched it, I could tell why. Because I called it a book review, and it wasn't really a very good book review. It was me talking about my book more than anything else. So because of Joanne Harris, I took the word review out of all my videos about books and just say I talk about or just read. And that seems to do better. And I was rating books by tamales. Silly. That's kind of silly. But, I mean, I don't want Joanne Harris mad at me, so I took the word review out of it. So anyways, but because I realized that the author of this book, like sometimes I'm stupid and don't realize that these people are out there and alive and on the internet. And like, you know, Gabriel Garcia Marquez is dead. Rest in peace. But a lot of other people are still alive and they're active. They're still active authors. They're still on the internet. They're still on Twitter and Instagram or what have you. So I think there's a dude watching me talk right now. He's parked in his car. Okay. So then I like, well, Joanne Harris is on Twitter and she is active on Twitter and she is kind of a hero, right? A very, very, very direct inspiration to me and my books and my writing style. So I was like, oh, and I started, you know, I've been tweeting her back and forth. She's active. Well, here's the thing. For a while, I didn't get on Twitter because I had the software that posted for me and stuff. But I immediately followed Joanne Harris, and we went back and forth for a while. And then I kind of like laid off Twitter and didn't really bother with it because I had stuff that posted for me automatically. But now I've canceled that software, and now I'm on Twitter all the time by myself, like actually interacting with people, interacting with Joanne Harris. So I decided to ask her some questions about the question that I had about Chocolat, things that weren't in the movie. And one of the questions was, and I don't think this is a spoiler. Well, I asked her, let's just say this. I asked her a question, and she doesn't really give direct answers. But one of her responses was, a response that she gave was, maybe you'll have to read the next book to find out. And I'm like, the next book? Oh, I know what I said. I said, which of your books should I read next? And she said, well, go to my website and pick one that attracts you. And I go to her website and I find out that there is a series based on Chocolat. There's a 3-book series. Chocolat is number 1. Number 2 is The Girl with No Shadow. Oh. All right. Also known as the Lollipop Shoes in the UK. That's the UK title. And the other one is Peaches for La Verga. Peaches for there's 2 titles, so I'm confused. Peaches for Father somebody. Or Peaches for Monsieur Le. I got it. Anyways, fuck, I got it. So I'm like, are you kidding me? I didn't know there's more of Vian. Yeah. And so I went and I picked it up, and then and this was the fun part. This is what I like to do, is I like to buy the used books. I like to go to the used bookstores, and people are like, we can order it. I'm like, no, man, this is part of the deal, is finding it. So, anyways, she told me that there's another book, and this is it. The Girl with No Shadow. So what I have to say about this, besides the fact that the paragraphs are smaller and I can read it easier, the story picks up years later after Chocolat, And Vienna has another daughter. And this is so cool because there's more. Okay, sorry. So there's chocolate in it, of course. But Vian has given up. She's given up making chocolate. And this is seems to me like any story where a person has superpowers, and Superman gave up his powers in Superman 2, and even in the new Star Wars, Luke Skywalker subdued his Jedi powers because he just didn't want to be traced. He didn't want to be able to be found, I think, and he just, it's a common story, right? Common plot. Like, people give up their powers because they no longer want to be associated with it, or whatever the bad things that it brings, or they want to be normal, right? And that's what Vian did, and she tried to lead a normal life. So for her and her daughters, and when the thing you like about someone is their powers, right, and they give it up, you're like, oh man, it's intriguing. The other thing is this new character. She comes in right away, and she's the villain, and she has this plan all along. You're like, oh, what's the plan? What is she going to do? And you want to keep reading because you want to find out what this plan is. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this book. And it's really intriguing because Joanne did not know that she was going to write a second book or a third. So how did she take these characters? And this is what's intriguing to me, is I didn't know I was going to write a third book. I'm on my third book. On a whim, just out of nowhere, I wrote my first book. 25 days of writing. Boom, it's done. It's a novella. It's not a novel. Sorry. Out of basically 1 or 2 lines about a really quick reference to a character, I wrote my second book. And because of the male figure in that is the same character in both books, my third book is based on him. I'm just going and going and going. I didn't know I was going to write a third book. I probably have a fourth. I have an idea for a fourth. My point is, it's apparent that Joanne did the same thing. One little line in Chocolat led to a major character in this book, and I just find that intriguing. Her second daughter is what I'm talking about. The baby. The whole thing is, I'm blown away by my thought process, and I think that I'm strange and unusual and not typical and weird or whatever. But to see that somebody else, somebody who I admire, somebody who I look up to, somebody who was a direct influence on me, kind of went through the same thing, that's fascinating. And to read the details and the story as it unfolds about these characters was a pleasure. So Joanne, if you're watching this, I hope I did better. I talk about myself a lot again, but I want you to know it's because you're an inspiration. All right? Anyways, The Girl with No Shadow, folks. The Girl with No Shadow. Oh, Lollipop Shoes, if you're in the UK. I appreciate you tuning in. I'll talk to you later.